You might remember last month a judge tossed out 2 indictments filed by the Virginia U.S. attorney, one against James Comey, the other against Leticia James, because it was thrown out because the U.S. attorney for the state of Virginia, Lindsey Halligan, a runner-up in the Miss Colorado beauty pageant, well, a judge said she was illegitimate, just like Alina Habba. This is true. Erik Siebert was the interim acting U.S. attorney for the state of Virginia. Now, he had yet to be confirmed by the Senate, so after his 120 days were up, a panel of judges from his district in Virginia voted to give him an extension. But when he refused to prosecute Leticia James and James Comey, Trump fired and then replaced him with Lindsey Halligan, who immediately indicted Comey and James. Her charges were riddled with spelling and legal blunders, but she came in 3rd place in the Miss Colorado beauty pageant. So the judge tossed out these 2 indictments against Comey and Leticia James, ruling that Lindsey Halligan doesn't get to enjoy the 120-day extension granted her predecessor because the judges gave that extension to someone who has actually prosecuted cases before. So her indictments evaporated because first, after they were thrown out, there was the statute of limitations on the Comey case. He can't be tried again, although there's a 6-month grace period, perhaps, where they could file another indictment against him. But the Department of Justice tried again to get Leticia James indicted on mortgage fraud. You might remember New York State Attorney General Leticia James proved Donald Trump defrauded lenders by lying to them about his actual net worth in order to secure lower interest rates when he refinanced his properties. He cheated bankers and lenders out of hundreds of millions of dollars, so a judge ordered him to pay a $500 million fine. The New York State Supreme Court ruled that that fine was excessive, but Leticia James is appealing. They did uphold the judge's ruling that Trump misled bankers to get a much lower interest rate. It's complicated, but think about your credit card. If you're putting $100 on your credit card and you're considered a bad risk, Visa will charge you, 23%, sometimes 33% interest on your credit card. If you're a good risk, you get a lower interest rate, and the same applies to getting a mortgage or refinancing a mortgage. The wealthier you are, the more likely it is you can pay back the loan, so you're considered a good risk. And they charge you less for the money, lower interest rate. So Trump forged documents to make it appear like he was worth way more than he actually was, and he saved hundreds of millions of dollars on interest payments. It's fraud. For example, Trump told lenders that Mar-a-Lago was worth anywhere between $426 million and $739 million. So he borrowed against it. And the lenders, because they don't do due diligence, they think if he doesn't repay the loan, they can seize Mar-a-Lago. The only problem is Trump doesn't own Mar-a-Lago. It's a club, which means people buy memberships that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that entitles them to a piece of the property. Also, Mar-a-Lago is an historical trust, meaning Trump enjoys amazing tax benefits when he purchased Mar-a-Lago and the upkeep of Mar-a-Lago, because he's forbidden from tearing Mar-a-Lago down. It's in a historical trust, which means nobody can subdivide Mar-a-Lago. So theoretically, Mar-a-Lago would be worth $500 million if Trump was allowed to subdivide it, but he can't, which is why the Palm Beach Tax Assessor repeatedly said Mar-a-Lago is worth about $20 million. But Trump, when filling out loan applications, claimed it was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And because these banks lending him money were probably laundering cash, dirty cash, for drug dealers and Russian oligarchs, especially if they were Deutsche Bank. We know Deutsche Bank launders money for drug dealers and Russian oligarchs, and Trump had a very healthy relationship with Deutsche Bank and Justice Kennedy's son. who worked for Deutsche Bank back then. They didn't ask any questions. They lent him money because they wanted to get that money through the system to clean it up. If you remember the trial, it wrapped up in January. This is the fraud, the bank fraud trial. It wrapped up in January of 2024. Leticia James, Attorney General for the state of New York, emasculated Donald Trump and proved he was a failure at real estate. And when he was ordered to put up a bond of $500 million after the judgment, he couldn't do it. He didn't have it, and no lender would give him a bond. In March of 2024, Trump was supposed to post a $454 million bond that would be held by the state of New York as Trump appealed the ruling. But his lawyers told an appellate judge that Trump doesn't have $454 million in cash. It would be impossible, they said, impossible was the word, to find any cash. And the lawyer added, nobody will lend him money to post bond. That was the dagger straight into Trump's testicles, because Trump's manhood is built on being a billionaire. He's not really, but he liked people to believe that. But here his lawyers were going on record telling a judge their client, the alleged billionaire, can't find $454 million to post a bond. Not only that, but no lender will give him the money. And what does that mean? It means that the Leticia James civil lawsuit was spot on, was correct. Donald Trump, the fact that he couldn't get anybody to lend him $454 million and that he didn't have $454 million, that proved he was defrauding lenders by inflating his net worth in order to secure loans at favorable interest rates. And when he tried to get a bond, by then the banks and lenders, they were onto him. They started doing due diligence. They knew the books were being cooked and that he could never pay them back. And they said, oh, well, he'll do what he always does, declare bankruptcy and pay us back pennies on the dollar. How many times has Donald Trump gone bankrupt? 5, 6 times? You know what it means when you go bankrupt? It means you don't have to pay back the money you borrowed, okay? So politically, some would say more than the E. Jean Carroll trial, more than the classified document indictments, the Manhattan criminal trial where Trump ended up being found guilty and he remains a convicted felon, more than the January 6th trial in D.C., the January 6th trial in Georgia, more than all of those put together, it was Leticia James's civil trial proving that Donald Trump was broke. That was the worst thing to happen to Donald Trump. It didn't destroy him politically. He did win the election, but it destroyed him as a man because that's all he has, the illusion of wealth. And we all know he doesn't have any. You know, he's making money as president, but it's all on paper. So he doesn't have money. That's why he ran for president, first as a branding exercise. And then he realized, wait a second, I can live off the hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars donated to my super PAC. The American voter, or at least half this country, can't understand that civil fraud trial. So they voted for him. But if they paid attention to the civil fraud trial, they would know that Trump is a fraud. And he was humiliated by Leticia James. Not only that, the people who count in Trump's world, the financiers, the New York society, people in the media, all the people Trump needs to impress, all the people he needs to make think he's a killer, a winner, a billionaire. Well, thanks to Leticia James, he came to realize that all those people he cares about, well, they now know beyond any reasonable doubt he's a fraud, guilty of fraud. So once Trump returned to the Oval Office, he went after New York State Attorney General Leticia James. He despises her. She's everything he hates and fears, a black woman. thanks to Leticia James, Trump is forbidden from running a charity in New York State or hosting a charitable event in New York. The President of the United States cannot host a charity event in New York State. It was Leticia James who got the Trump Family Foundation shut down in 2019 while he was still president. He was forced to pay restitution to all the charities he ripped off, and he promised to shut down the Trump Family Charitable Foundation and never host a charity again or set up a charitable foundation again in the state of New York. So this is why Trump fired Erik Siebert, the U.S. attorney for Virginia, who wouldn't prosecute Leticia James for mortgage fraud. Leticia James purchased a home in Virginia, and when she took out her mortgage, she listed that home in Virginia as a secondary residence. That's according to the original indictment that got thrown out. The government said Leticia James lied to lenders when she said it was a secondary residence because she wanted a lower interest rate on the mortgage. But the government said, no, it was an investment property, a rental property. She lied to the lenders because if it's a rental property, that's riskier, so they charge her a higher interest rate. We're talking nickels and dimes here. So that's why she got indicted. I'm going to tell you something that blew me away. I didn't know this. But I'll get to it in a second. It turns out she purchased the home for her relatives and wasn't charging them any rent. But that didn't matter. Trump wanted her to go through the torture of the American legal system. He wanted her to get a taste of what his life was like after he lost in 2020 and what his life will be like should he ever vacate the White House. So after her indictment, after Leticia James's indictment got thrown out because of Lindsey Halligan's illegitimacy, the Justice Department tried to get Leticia James indicted again for the same alleged crime. They used a different prosecutor. And on December 4th, a second grand jury in Norfolk, Virginia said, no, we're not returning an indictment. So I'm going to tell you something that blew me away. Scott MacFarlane, this is amazing. Scott MacFarlane and Joe Walsh posted an update on the CBS News website, and they wrote something that blew me away. It was about the Norfolk, Virginia grand jury failing to re-indict Leticia James. Scott MacFarlane and Joe Walsh over at CBS News pored over Justice Department figures from the year 2016. And they found that the U.S. Justice Department tried to indict 150,000 people in 2016. Of those 150,000 people they tried to indict, a grand jury failed to indict only 6 out of 150,000 subjects of a federal investigation were not indicted by a grand jury. 6 out of 150,000. Now, I always knew the expression, a prosecutor could indict a ham sandwich. I knew that was based on the truth, but I never knew it was that easy to get an indictment from a grand jury. According to the federal rules of criminal procedure, the subject of an investigation doesn't have the right to testify before the grand jury to clear their name. And no defense attorney is ever allowed in the room. There is no judge before a grand jury hearing. It's just the prosecutor presenting evidence to the grand jury. The prosecutor picks and chooses what evidence to present and which witnesses can testify. If the subject of the investigation is permitted to testify before that grand jury, the subject cannot be cross-examined by their attorney, who is forbidden to be in the room. That is why, I didn't know the numbers here, but that is why in 2016, according to CBS News, the Justice Department tried to indict 150,000 people, and they failed only 6 times. Only 6 times a grand jury wouldn't indict.